Hi, Peter Charles here, Hook to Fly Fly Fishing. And today I'd like to talk about a different mindset towards soft hackle wet flies. And there's a reason for this. When we fish soft hackle wet flies, it's very common for us to be very close to the surface. In fact, if you're looking at these videos I've got going on behind me, you'll see that the fish often break the surface of the water when they took the fly. It was running that shallow. It was literally like a millimeter or two underneath the water. And that's very common when we're fishing wet flies, that we're, especially soft hackle wet flies, that we're fishing them right close to the surface. But when you're talking about the emergence of either a mayfly or a caddis, you're going to get a different profile. The fly, the insect, begins to emerge or starts the emergence along the bottom, and they'll be drifting along the bottom of the water, and then they'll rise up as their body's filled with air, and then they'll be along the surface of the water for a while until they're able to break free of their skin and fly away. Now, depending on the species we're talking about, sometimes that happens very quickly, sometimes it happens slowly. And with caddis, sometimes the emergence into adult happens under the water, down in the water column. For example, when I first started fly fishing for trout about 35 years ago, my very first trout I caught on a fly was on a elk hair caddis that I was dragging out of the water. I was trying to fish for some rising trout. I wasn't doing very well, wasn't getting anything. My friends were leaving and I didn't really want to leave the area, like there was fish there, and I reluctantly turned and started walking. My fly was still in the water. It'd gone underneath the water, and that's when a trout hit it. So my very first trout came on a sunken dry fly that could have been functioning either as an emerging caddis or an egg-laying caddis, either one. So that's the reality, is a lot of hits are subsurface, and some of them are quite low down. In fact, I was fishing the west branch of the Osable in New York, and there was fish all over the place. We couldn't get them to hit anything until I noticed they seemed to be active about a foot down under the water. So I put a bit of split shot on the end of my dry fly leader and sunk my dry fly caddis, again another elk hair caddis, down about a foot, and I got fish after fish after fish once I did that. So we're tuned at being either fishing a dry fly on top of the water or fishing a wet fly just underneath the water, but the reality is a lot is going on below that. So when I started Euro nymphing, I did it the traditional way. You make a short cast upstream, you lead it downstream, pick up, and you're just doing this, quick motions like this. You're covering a relatively short area of water, and you're always sort of almost dead drifting, sort of dragging the fly a little bit to keep contact with it. What I started to do afterwards, when I got out of that habit with Euro nymphing, was I would do that particular drift, and then I would let it swing. And what I found is I got a lot of hits and a lot of fish just as it started to move and started to rise. And if you've ever paid attention to fish instead of doing the fishing, but rather watch what's going on, you'll see that trout will often follow a fly. And either it's a dry fly, they'll be just underneath it, or they'll follow a nymph, and they're sort of making up their mind whether they want to take it or not. And the thing, as soon as it starts to move sideways, that's a sign of something that's alive, and they hit it. And so I got a lot of hits with my Euro nymphing rig when I started to swing it. Just at the moment it started to move, bang, the fish would be on. And I've got some footage going on behind me of it doing exactly that. So what I have on the vise here is a partridge and orange that's tied on a Euro nymph style setup with a bead head, a very heavy tungsten bead. This fly will be fished near the bottom, and then when I begin to swing it, it will start to rise. Now, it won't go right to the top, it's too heavy, but it will start to rise. And so that's the point of this. I'm going to fish this as, say a caddis emerger, and as I say, as it's starting to go up, as it starts to swing and starts to lift, I expect to get a lot of hits doing that. So what I've done here, I'm not bothering to tie this one in front of you. I'm just showing you what it actually looks like, because it's just a partridge and orange tied on a Euronymph rig. So all I'm doing is using the standard, bead heads and hooks, And if you want something bigger, for, say smallmouth, you can go to a rig like this, which is just a standard jig hook with a 45-degree angle instead of it being totally upright. And I just put a tungsten bead on that. And you could do the same thing, only in a larger size, as I say, for smallmouth, for steelhead, for a variety of different species that will likely want a bigger fly. You could tie a variety of, soft hackle, shall we say, that are in large sizes for those types of species of fish. So the idea here is that when we, put together our fly box, and we're doing partridge and orange as an example, or grouse and green, whatever we're doing in the way of our soft hackle wets, keep in mind that that emergence phase starts at the bottom. And so if you fish your partridge and orange along the bottom, you can be just as successful as being fished at the top. And it's when it makes that transition, when it starts to move, is when the fish are most likely to hit it. So a fly like this is going to be just as useful to you in your fly box as a standard partridge and orange. So give that some thought, that you shouldn't just go out there with a standard wet fly. You should go out with something that looks like this, that will, catch fish near the bottom as well as near the top. So give that some thought, and remember that profile of a typical emergence. It isn't just at the top. It starts at the bottom. So give that some thought. Cheers.